Well, hello, Joe.
Hello, Steve.
Let me publicly thank you for being one of the sponsors for this show. I really appreciate that as my headset falls off to get the ball rolling here.
You know that it's my pleasure. I've been listening, long before that. So I think I've probably listened to every show throughout time. I went backwards for a while. So yeah, absolutely.
I loved how you used to tell me that you would listen when you were driving from your Worcester store to your Northampton store.
Yeah, it's typically, it's right about an hour. So most of the time it filled up the whole ride, which was perfect. And then on the way back, I just catch the next episode.
For you people out there in all other parts of the world, Worcester and Northampton are both in Massachusetts. One's in Central Mass, one's in Western Mass. Joe, I wanted to ask you, where did you grow up and, when did you start listening to music?
Sure. I grew up in Worcester.
Right in the city?
Yeah, right behind Holy Cross, up the top of the hill there. And I always loved music. When I was really young, I don't even know, 6 or 7, I got my first all-in-one with an 8-track and the turntable and tuner, and I can remember swinging on my swing set. John Denver's Greatest Hits was my favorite when I was that big, singing Sunshine on My Shoulder.
How old were you when you did this?
I think I was probably 6 or 7.
Wow,
or something,
John Denver. You're the first guest I've had that's given us a John Denver plug, so that's worth something.
That's funny. But yeah, no, it was, I just always did, I never became a musician, which we've talked about and things like that, but I've always been in and around it, even when I was doing my corporate thing and everything. So yeah, right in Worcester, and from as long as I can remember.
You never played any instruments or anything like that?
I have an acoustic guitar, and I can strum the basic chords and things like that, but I don't pick it up often. Used to a little more, and never took it to any level where I could sit with someone and play or anything like that.
I played guitar and, played a little bit with people, but mostly I was good with a hockey stick in front of the mirror, as my audience knows, because I brag about that. So when did you go? Do you remember going to your first concert?
The first real one? Yeah. I do. Yep. I had already bought obstructed view tickets to, and we were just talking earlier, to Van Halen on the 1984 tour.
When you say obstructed view, you're talking about...
It was in the Centrum at the time, and I don't know, it must have been something.
Worcester Centrum.
Yeah. But the day of, AAF was giving away tickets, and there was, be whatever caller, and I was dialing madly on the phone. Actually, it was probably circling back then, and got through and won tickets. So, I got an upgrade on the tickets, and that was my first one. So it was exciting to go from, I don't know, we're going to be in the last row somewhere to having halfway decent tickets. So that was the first one. And again, it was...
Who was it?
Van Halen.
Van Halen.
On the 1984.
Wow. Tour. Oh, that's a great tour to be
so
on. Panama and all those tunes. Yeah.
So I must have been about 14 at that time. And that was, like I say, the first, major one that I went to.
Were there a lot of other notable shows that you can remember that you went to when you were young? Because you got an early start. I think you might have beat me. I think at 15 I saw Jethro Tull and Jay Giles. So I think you beat me by a year.
Yeah, I mean, we were so lucky in Worcester in the period that I grew up, because the Centrum was, now the DCU, was the premier venue in New England. I think it, for quite a run there, it was one of the top grossing venues in the country, because the old Garden was run down.
Boston Garden.
Yeah. Wasn't good acoustically and all that stuff. So when they built the Centrum in Worcester, that's where everyone went. They would, when they were there, they'd say, "Hey, great to be in Boston," but it was in Worcester. So I've, my teen years rolling right down the street and going there, saw everyone from, like I said, Van Halen, U2, Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, Phil Collins. So everything in between. I've always been into, all sorts of stuff. Grateful Dead many times.
What year did they build the Centrum? Because I think I was already in California by then. Because I used to go to Providence Civic Center, Springfield Civic Center, and the Boston Garden. Yeah. And I saw Kiss at the Hartford Civic Center.
Yeah, sure.
That's a whole New England thing right there, man.
Yeah, you just touched all the venues.
Yeah.
I would guess, and I should know this actually, but I want to say 82. And, Frank Sinatra opened it. That was the big thing at the time. Yeah, that was the first show. And it was around there. It was earlier, 80s.
What was your favorite? Was the Van Halen one, since it was your first, was that your favorite concert you ever went to?
No. You know what is, which is very strange, and it's more...
It can be more recent.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's actually a more recent one. And one thing that we were talking about in the hall, that sometimes when your expectations are a certain... If you either don't have them or they're low, you end up blown away. This was probably, I don't know how many, maybe 7-ish years ago in Worcester. Sting and Peter Gabriel, I guess they were hanging out with their friends at one time around the year before this, and neither one of them had things scheduled right then. So they're like, let's go out on the road together. And they just didn't abbreviate it. There was, I don't know, maybe a handful of shows in the U.S. So I went there thinking, well, it's right next door. It's Sting and Peter Gabriel. You got to go check it out. But that was my expectation. All right, let's go check it out. It was phenomenal. Now, obviously.
Who opened for who?
I think they alternated at times, but I want to say that this night Peter Gabriel went on first, but I honestly don't remember. And part of the reason that it becomes blurred is both of their bands were on the entire time. So you had 2 drummers playing the whole time, 2 bass players playing the same songs, right? 2 guitarists, and Sting's backup singers were on one side of the stage. Peter Gabriel's backup singers
Did they alternate songs?
At times they did, yeah. But when Sting was up front, Peter Gabriel was with his backup singer singing. And when Peter was up front, Sting was with his backup singer singing. And they would kind of trade off a little here and there. And each one did about 2 or 3 of the other one's songs, too. And again, so, like Sting did Selling England by the Pound, an old Genesis song. So it was just,
wow.
It was incredible.
That's cool.
And what you could sense more than anything to me, and part of the reason I think it was one of my favorite shows at this point, is they were both just having the time of their lives. They were out there smiling, seeming like they were enjoying everything so much. So it was honestly one of my favorite shows that I never would have thought.
I'm getting to Sting's discography because I worked at A&M, and of course I remembered 10 Summoner's Tales, but I couldn't remember Mercury Falling. That's when I got to meet Sting, and I hung out at a couple of backstage things with him. My job on those shows was to bring all these people from retail, like guys like you, and because when I was an alternative marketing guy over at A&M, I got to know all the mom and pop stores around the country because everything has to start somewhere. Sure. We're going to get into that. That's why I wanted you on the show, because I know things have changed, but basically you have to have a starting point at retail. You couldn't just jump right in back then it was Musicland, Transworld. Around here it was Strawberries. Right. It wasn't like that. When I think you mentioned to me that you went to Nichols College.
Yes. Yep, from 88 to 92. Got my degree in accounting. Exciting stuff.
Accounting. Well, it kind of comes in handy, right?
In these, exciting music careers.
But it comes in handy when you work at a record store. Someone has to keep track of the money, right?
Yeah, all of that. And it's come in super handy. In my corporate career, everything I learned from different aspects of it, from supply chain to manufacturing and everything else, I put all that into play at the store, which is, kind of why I hope it, seems a little different when you're in there than most new and used record stores.
For people outside of New England, Nichols College is a small, really good college. It's mostly known for business. It's nestled in the hills of Dudley, Massachusetts, which is, it's funny because Dudley kind of became a little well-known recently because Chris Lindstrom, who played football out there at Shepherd Hill High School, was the 13th pick in the NFL draft for the Atlanta Falcons not too long ago. Other than him, you're probably the most famous person that's ever been in Dudley that I can think of right now, anyways, off the top of my head. When you were at Nichols, did you do like college radio or booking, or were you involved in music at all? Or
no, I wasn't. So I didn't do it. I think there was a small station there. I don't even remember if I listened to it.
There is a college radio station there because I used to hear it at my house in Webster. Because I grew up right near Dudley. So.
Okay. What I listened to all the time when I was there was WBRU from Brown University at that time.
Oh, yeah, down in Rhode Island.
Yeah, great. So it was, alternative format for alternative music, and it was great.
It's funny. I listened to HUS, which is the University of Connecticut's station. They had great punk shows. Because when I was in high school, 10 years before you, punk just started happening, like in the late 70s, early 80s, things started really happening. If you could, CUW in Worcester was also good for that too.
That's right.
And I think there was another station. That's Clark. They started at Clark. I don't know if they're still with Clark University.
They're not.
The other Holy Cross has a college radio station too.
Yeah, and they have throughout time.
So you basically, when you left school and you have your accounting degree, did you start working at record stores, or did you? I mean, how did you end up going in that direction?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, because I always loved music, I was kind of always in it. So when it came to, it was a little bit of two things going on at that time when I was still in my early 20s. One was going to the corporate job every day and doing the accounting work. And within a few years, I was controller of a division and all those, really exciting things. And but at the same time, I had a friend who was a musician, always had bands. I really liked their stuff. So I managed them for a few years.
Who was the
booking
band?
And everything. They were called, oddly enough, Joe Rockhead.
Joe Rockhead from Worcester, huh?
Yeah.
Sounds kind of familiar.
Yeah, I'll have to get you a couple CDs from back then. They had a few, so probably 3, 4, something like that. So I was in that.
Were they like a band that would play at it was Sir Morgan's Cove, then it became the Lucky Dog Music Hall.
Right.
Was it that circuit or Ralph's? There's good music venues in Worcester.
Right, absolutely. All of those bowlers at the time. I don't know if you were ever there.
Don't know that place.
The people who owned Ralph's opened another one kind of on the street behind it before Vincent. The actual Ralph and his wife opened this place, Bowlers, which was, just behind Ralph's. But
was it Bowlers?
Yeah, just like if you were bowling. Real big club. But, just a warehouse basically. But it was really cool. And a lot of acts went there actually. Bikini Kill played there.
Bikini Kill, really?
At the time. So they would get a lot of cool stuff. Craig Seaman,
great writer for the Worcester Telegram Gazette.
That's right.
Love that guy.
Within the last 2 months, I think, did an article on bowlers.
He did?
Yeah, so you should look that up on the Worcester Telegram because it's a good article and it mentions a lot of acts like that you'd be like, wow, I can't believe, they went through there and no one even knows of the club hardly, except for those of us that went a lot. So yeah, they played all those venues, came out this way a little bit, but not much. Maybe got down to New York a couple times. But, they all had day jobs too and everything. So it wasn't, traveling around the country in a van and devoting to
I didn't know you were a music manager. I'm impressed by that. Having been a manager for 20 years myself, you probably had, I'm surprised you don't have a psychology degree because that's what you need to be a rock manager.
That's true.
So you're managing, and how did you end up working at a record store or?
No, I did the whole corporate thing for probably the better part of 25 years, right?
Wow.
So in 08, 09, when the economy really kind of dropped out, the company that I was at that time, I was the vice president of operations, responsible for like $600 million worth of production of high-end robotics for semiconductor wafers. And the company overnight, cut 1,200 employees. And luckily I was there for a while as I transitioned everything to kind of a new group. But then I was out of work for a little bit. I was bored at home. I painted things around the house, did that. And by the time winter came, I dragged out all my records out of the basement that had been sitting in a corner for 25 years, and I hooked it up and I was right away struck by the sound, which was funny because a guy who managed some of the inventory aspects of things for me at that company was also a big music guy. And we would take, boxes of CDs and, give them to each other to burn and things like that. And we would have conversations. And he would always tell me, I still have my vinyl set up and everything there and the, thousands of CDs, thousands of records. And throughout all the years, I'll have someone face the other way and I'll play a song from a CD and a song from the record. And 100% of the time over that, 10, 15 year period, they always choose the record. And I used to say, Steve, you're full of shit. There's no way, because I hadn't listened to them in 20 years. And what I was thinking of was the clicks and pops, if you had one that had scratches or things like that. I'm like, Steve, you're out of your mind. As soon as I hooked mine up and played them that time in my room 13 years ago, right away, I was like, holy shit. I called him. I was like, Steve, I owe you an apology. This sounds amazing. Because I had gone down the path from, the records to CDs. And
cassettes.
All that stuff. And then became an early adopter to the iPod. So I had that.
Digital.
And I had, a little dock in my office at work. And even before they had them in cars, I got installed a way to hook it up so that I had it there. So I was bringing it everywhere and didn't realize how bad the sound had become that I was listening to, because it still sounds good if you have nothing to compare it to, right? But your MP3 in the car, I'm going in different directions. But one day around that time period, before I get into the records, there was a new CD coming out. Oddly enough, woman Lori McKenna, who's from Stoughton, Mass,
Okay.
who I love.
Yeah.
And so it was things used to drop on Tuesdays. So I think, at lunchtime, I went from the office, I ran to Walmart or something, bought that CD and threw it in the car. And again, I hadn't even played CDs in a while because I always had that iPod with 25,000 songs on it. And as soon as I put the CD in the car, I was like, holy crap. The amount of sound coming out of it versus the MP3s and everything was just night and day. So this is a long answer to your question, but after hooking up those records and kind of falling in love again and being in between jobs for about 6 months, I just started looking for collections because at that time this was.
Oh, you started buying collections?
Yeah, because it was 2009, 2010. I was like, where can I buy this stuff? I have my stuff from when I was a kid.
It was a good time too because vinyl exploded years after that.
Yeah,
so you were like looking at a good time. You probably got some good stuff.
Just luck, right? That the timing happened that way because when I started looking around, there weren't many places to buy it. Certainly in the Worcester area. And even online, you could go to the eBays and things like that where everyone tells you it's great condition. You get it, and it looks like, they sandpapered the thing. Or the, places, online stores even, they would sell the real high-end, expensive stuff, but not a lot of other things. So I bought a couple collections, had never built a website before, but built the website and really started it at that time on like $3 to $5 records, just, common stuff by the police and everything that now is 15 to 20. But at that time, did that. And the first day that I went live with the website, I got an order from, somewhere in the country. I was like, how does anyone even know this is there? So it was a really cool story of doing that. And then, when I got another corporate gig pretty quickly, I was like, I don't think I'm going to stop doing this. I'm going to keep it on the side. One, the economy was still tenuous at best. And so keeping something else off to the side was good. And so it was just my love of music and the timing of my pulling out my stuff and hooking it up and where I was career-wise that kept me doing that online. Then a couple of years later, a year and a half, I was like, I don't want this stuff in my house. And if I have to pay for storage, because it was getting bigger and bigger inventory-wise.
How many records were you talking about?
I don't know. I had a couple like metal racks, kind of more industrial ones in the basement, full of bins of records.
Wow.
And then I'd be, going out. The kids were small then, and they hated it. I'd be dragging
What
them.
about the wife?
She's luckily I'm super lucky, and she is very accommodating. I have a unique situation there. I know from all the guys that come into the store. I met your
wife once at the store.
That's right.
She's nice.
So many guys that are bringing in records to sell them are doing it solely because their wife said, get them out of here type of thing. But she's cool with everything, which is great. So, when I was like, well, where am I going to store this stuff? I said, let me just get a small storefront rather than putting it in storage and going there all the time, and let's see what happens. And so first it was just weekends.
Where was that located?
That was, and I don't know if you were ever at that one. It was, I forget the address, but it was way down Pleasant Street, almost before you go into Paxton.
I wasn't there.
Yeah, so it was.
I was probably not living there. Otherwise, I would have found it because I
Yeah.
find all these record stores everywhere now.
It opened in midway through 2012.
Was it Joe's Albums right from the start?
It was. I kind of had some internal conflict with that when I went to open the brick and mortar, because when I was doing the website at first, since that preceded the actual physical store, I just wanted something easy to remember and type. Because, it's weird when you're like, okay, what's this record store? And it's some big, long psychedelic thing, right? You got to type all that in and remember it next time if it's something that you're unfamiliar with. So I just, searched. And Joe's Albums was available. And I was like, well, that's easy to remember and type in. So I went with that. But again, the year and a half later when I was opening the store, I'm like, that's pretty uncreative, Should I do something different? And Worcester for decades had a store called
Albums.
Right.
I was going to say, I used to go to Albums.
So they had certain reputations and different people think of them differently and everything, but they had been out of business for a while. And so I was like, should I call it Joe's Albums, or should I change it to, one, disassociate from the old albums, two, have something a little more creative and exciting. But in the end, I was like, you know what? I have regular customers across the country now, and to add some confusion there. And again, it is easy for people to remember, and so I just said I'm sticking with it.
When did you end up on the Main Street location that you're at now?
It was 6.5 years ago.
Wow, you've been there that long, huh?
Yeah.
See, I was out in Pittsburgh, so I didn't know. The reason I found you guys, I'll give a little plug to my friend Tom Wilson, who was on the show, who worked with The Cure, Depeche Mode, Coldplay, Shakira. He was on the show and talked about his career. And one day he gave me a Black Sabbath record, the first one. He goes, I got an extra copy of this, and you said you don't have it. Here you go. And it had it. It was in the clear case.
The outer sleeve.
Yeah, and it said Joe's albums. I'm like, what the hell's Joe's albums? He's like, you never been there? He's like, they got $1 sections there, and you could find stuff there. I'm like, $1 section? Of course, that's not why I go there now, because we all know what's in the $1 section. No offense.
Sure.
It's not exactly a lot of stuff I'm looking for.
Right.
But, if you want a Linda Ronstadt record, there's probably a lot of Linda
That sort of
Ronstadt
stuff, sure,
records.
yeah.
We're going to geek out on some of the stuff here. Anyway, so I went there, and I started coming regularly, and I like it. And then I'm going to fast forward a little bit. You decided to open your store. When did you decide to open your store in Northampton, and why Northampton? I know Northampton is a college town because I mentioned that when I do your spot. Smith College is there, which is a very famous college.
Sure.
And you're not far from UMass
Right.
and Amherst. Is that why you picked the location, because of the colleges?
Yes and no. So my sister, who's a couple years older than myself, went to UMass. So she would have been there for
Zoomass.
at the time. Yes, that was what it was still known for. And I don't, and I think at that time period in Playboy magazine, it was ranked one of the top party schools in the country and everything.
Well, let me just tell you a quick story here. I don't want to interrupt you, but I once stayed in the dorm there for a month, and I didn't go to school there, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Go ahead.
it was.
I had a girlfriend that went to school there, and I crashed in her room
Sure.
for a month once. But go ahead.
Yeah, fun times back then. So I used to go out all the time and stay over there myself with my sister, when either in the dorms or within a couple of years when she had apartments around and everything, So we would go out there. She has lived there ever since, and got married and has family and everything. And she then went to grad school at Smith and other things, and they lived right in Florence for a while, which is borders Northampton. So real familiar with the area, always loved it. So we would go out there, to visit, stay over again back in those days all the time. So I always kind of thought that it would be a nice place, combined with, and this was really one of the big things in my mind, Northampton, outside of Boston and Massachusetts, for a long, long time now, has been the best music area when it comes to live.
Western Mass?
Yeah, venues and music there. Because you had the Iron Horse, which forever, had great acts. The Calvin Theater, Pearl Street. I saw
Jay Mascis is from Western
That's
Mass.
right. Yeah, isn't that Amherst, North?
Yeah,
and he's still around out there
Yeah.
a lot of times. But I remember again, I don't know, early '90s or something, seeing Lisa Loeb in one of those little venues when her song hit, and just lots of different groups out there. So it's always been a real big music and kind of artist area. So I've always had in mind, always loved it, enjoyed visiting it. So in 2018, my daughter and I took a ride out, and I lined up some visits with a real estate person to look at, some
Possible
vacant
locations.
shops out there. Yeah. And at that time, I was wanting to do it, but then, this is boring stuff, but our point of sale in store in our website, which like all of our inventory is on the website, and it's, it takes a lot to maintain it. We do it all in house.
JoesAlbums.com is awesome.
Yes. So, they were two different systems, and we would, if something sold in store, we'd go onto the back end of the website and adjust it out of there, or vice versa. So you're maintaining two different systems. So my mind went to, I can't open another store when I'm working on two different systems now, add a third and keep all the inventory straight between selling online and this and that. So I dropped back and said, all right, I need to consolidate and migrate from these two platforms to a singular one that's fully integrated. So I did that for the next year and a half, well, a couple of years almost. Got it completed, and COVID hit. So it wasn't a time to go open, at that period. But as soon as things, really opened up again, I said, let's do it. And so it's been open for about a year and a half out there now.
Samantha,
Yes.
Sam is out there.
That's right. Yeah.
She's cool.
Yeah, she's a great girl. She, she's originally from Denver, lived the last few years down in Austin, Texas, has always been in the
Yeah,
music
she's been
and the
around.
music scene.
We've talked. She's cool.
Yeah, and so she, she really, I couldn't ask for anyone to care about the business in the store than she does. You know, she treats it like it's her own. And
She
everything.
knows music too, which
Yeah,
is very
absolutely.
important.
And in a wide breadth of it. You know, everything from hip hop to psych and metal and everything in between, which is great.
Yeah, I got to ask you this. You have a few different employees. Is that like the first thing that you have to talk to them about is whether they actually have a knowledge of music to
Sure.
work in your
Yeah.
store? Because you don't want someone behind the counter like, do you have any Fairport Convention? And they look at you like, what? What's Fairport Convention? You want someone that knows obscure bands, you know?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, you definitely need that, and you need someone who does, you know, have knowledge of records and some stereo.
Or even as a
things like
total
that.
geek on a different genre. Like
Yeah,
if you have
and
a metal
that's what I was
head-
going to say. So,
Yeah.
so you know, having someone maybe a little younger who might be more submerged and have a passion for things that we kind of missed out on because we were, you know, it was after our time. Not that we're not listening to new stuff now and everything, but like both Sam and one of the guys that I hired in Worcester in the last 8 months, Mike, another great guy, are about mid-30s. So,
okay, a little
they're-
younger.
Yeah. So what they can speak to and be passionate about and have a deeper knowledge is different than what, you know, myself and Tom
That makes
and
sense.
Jeff can. Which makes it nicer, especially as the demographic is getting younger and younger.
All right, we got to get into something I really want to get into now.
Sure.
So, I mean, I want to talk to you about rarities and albums that are hard to get and expensive records. What are some of the most sought after records that you currently have for sale, and maybe even in your, like, to answer that part first, and then something that you might have in your personal collection that you would never sell. So first, talk about. What are people looking for that come in there these days? Aside from new releases, you know, the geeks like me that want to know, you know, what's the best version of like, you know, the Revolver album that you have or something like that, you know? I mean, what are people looking for? You had the Modern Lovers original pressing recently, stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah. There's and that's just it. Is a lot of times the ones that come through that are really valuable might not be the ones that everyone's specifically coming in to look for, right? That's always going to be the bit more mainstream stuff. You know, people are always looking for old like jazz Blue Note ones that are in good condition and things
Blue
like
Note,
that.
yeah.
Because there just aren't many, right? And they sound phenomenal. Different audiophile ones. You know, nowadays a lot of things gets into the colors and variants, which isn't my thing. I guess I have an appreciation for people wanting some of that, but to me it's more about the music and the record. But yes, the Modern Lovers, things like that came in that, you know, was, I forget what it was, $350 record that only lasted a week because there just aren't many of them there. And something funny about that is you can get a different version of it any day of the week because they've pressed it ever since it came out. But that one, that
The
they only
original
made
one
probably,
is what
I don't
you
even
want.
know, maybe 500 or something
Yeah.
like that. So those happen. You know, in the past, I had a guy who worked, and this was probably over 10 years ago, at a pressing plant in California, RTI, a good pressing plant. And, you know, he had left there long ago, lived up in Gardner or something, came down with a whole van full of things. And it was a lot of things that he must take right at the end of the line when they're making test press. So they were test pressings.
Ooh, I love
There
test
were
pressings.
there was a ton of radio shows, which to me was the coolest thing. And I still have some of them that, you know, King Biscuit Flower Hour.
Oh,
all that sort of
yeah.
stuff from back then that, you know, as a kid that I'd listen to on Sunday night.
BBC maybe?
There was some of that. I think more of that is over in the UK than here. I forget, but there was some like, you know, NBC broadcast, all these different things. And
those are
thought,
valuable.
Yeah, because there aren't many, right? They were only at the studios.
Right.
And I always thought as a kid, you know, because they would say brought to you live from Madison Square Garden or whatever. So I thought, you know, somehow they were pumping that stuff through and it was broadcasting live. It was all pressed on records. And so that's what they were playing in the studio.
Really?
Yeah. And it even says, you know, still the brought to you live, but it has all the commercials on it. It's the most fun thing, right? So you're listening to some live show from, you know, 1985 again, something like that. And then we'll be right back after these messages and Be All You Can Be in the Army comes on the jingle and things like that. So it's just great. They're time capsules. I love it. And so all that stuff that came in was really cool. But within that, there were a couple things. One was a test pressing, a Mobile Fidelity Sound Labs. And for those who, you know, aren't record geeks like Steve and I, they're an audiophile label, higher end, you know, pricier, been around since the late 70s. There was a Janis Joplin Pearl one in there that was a test pressing. Come to find out, they never actually issued it. So I don't know if something happened with the rights before they got to pressing, but they took it all the way to the test pressing, but then they never put it out. So there's only a few of these that existed
You have
from
one?
that. I did. I sold it because it was in
Can I ask you how much?
1,000.
$1,000.
And that was probably, 6-7 years ago, or at least 5, and prices have gone up, a lot since then. But one cool thing that I still have, and I just broke it out the other day.
This falls into the category of stuff you won't sell.
Yeah, because I don't know what to do with this one, and I can't even find much information. But it's also so cool that I wouldn't. It's one of those radio programs, and I think it's NBC or something. No, not that mainstream. But anyway, it's
You
the
just
history,
don't want to tell us.
No, it's the history of guitar. And it's either 36 or 38 hours, right? I've got it in these boxes.
What?
It's about this big. And it starts, the first one's like Robert Johnson and the Blues. And it's giving you more of a, okay, here's what happened throughout history. But then over those 36, 38 hours, when you get down into it, there's a whole Dylan record and a whole Pink Floyd record and things like that. And they're talking about the guitar. And then they're interviewing, people and some of the guys from the band speaking and everything. And I can't even find much information on any of these individual records online, and I've got the whole set. That they did it once a week, and it must have been most of the year if it was in the.
Does
high
anyone
30s.
Ever contact you looking for this, or
For
is
that
it
sort of stuff? I don't think anyone knows it exists.
Is it on Discogs?
I can't find much on there.
Wow,
it's really
that's
strange.
amazing.
What I thought of doing, because I think it should be shared and it's really cool, is starting at some point and saying, all right, every Thursday at 6:00 we're going to stay open late and come down and we're going to work for the next 30-something weeks and play this if you're into it. And you do something like that, just get people coming down to hear it because it's pretty neat stuff.
Are you surprised by how valuable all the old hardcore records are now? Like anything that came out around 79, 80, 81, 82, the value is so skyrocketed.
Yeah, no, I'm not. To be
You don't
honest.
hardly ever get any of those records,
Not
do
in
you?
a while. It's
like SSD and stuff like that.
SSD, I mean, that's like super rare. And I did have it, again, probably 10 years ago when I got a great punk collection and it had all that stuff in it. Probably about 3-4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I did, and you mentioned WCUW earlier. There was a guy who was a DJ there, Mike Marley, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. His partner contacted me because he said, I had someone come from the Midwest to come look at a store out there to come look at the collection, but Mike loved your store and like to go there all the time, so I wanted you to come take a look. Anyway, I bought the collection, and because it was from CUW there, and it was, now Mike obviously continued to buy because he was coming to my store at these times, but when CUW changed formats and weren't using records
When they
any
didn't think
longer,
vinyl was going to matter
Right.
anymore.
Mike had said, can I take the stuff? And they're like, yeah, take it. So they
Take
were
it? Just
thousands,
take it?
yeah. So there were thousands of records in that collection, which had a lot of punk. And that was only a few years ago. So, it kind of comes and goes in waves. And during that time period, because
Is that when Tom Wilson found you and came down and got all...
Tom somehow has been there from the very beginning, right from the old store, the first year that
He
I
has the
opened.
first SSD
Yeah.
record. at
Although,
his
you know
house.
what? Tom's wife, Liz, who's a great person.
I love
also.
Liz.
Yeah. She was... It's a nice little stretch where the old store
Liz
was.
Perez.
Yes. Whose brother was in the scene, right?
Yes, he was in the Boston crew.
Yeah.
Tony Perez, one of the original Boston hardcore guys.
Right. So this, kind of the Tatnick area where the old store is, more like a nice little neighborhood, nicer part of Worcester type of thing. So there was a yarn store, like up about
A yarn
three
store?
or four doors from the record store, and Liz was going there like once a week, and I don't know if they were
And she
had
found
a,
you?
had a knitting circle or something. I assume that's how Tom ended up there,
Wow.
or vice versa. Maybe she ended up there because of him coming to the store. But anyway, he's been there, right from the start. But that collection was great, and during that time period, because it takes a while because we clean all the records and we enter.
Yeah,
them
you
all.
have one of those cleaning machines. I
Yeah.
saw it in your back room. That thing's fascinating.
It is. It's great.
It's not cheap either, is it?
No, they're not. It's about $800 for that.
This is really good. It's the best way to clean an album.
It is because
right?
it vacuums, gets all that stuff off of there.
Do you do that with every record that you get from your collections that you buy?
Not every single one, but the overwhelming
Yeah.
majority. Because there are some that you take out, and it looks like no one ever took it out of the sleeve before. It's so pristine. There's not a speck of dust or
I
anything.
love
so,
when you find a record
yeah.
sealed.
So when that's the case, I figure why introduce
record, I mean.
some other cleaning and things like that when it just doesn't need it. But yeah, so it's cool. And when the rare stuff comes, there's certainly a buzz and excitement. That collection, when I had it last, I would say for 2 months, or the better part of 2 months, every Friday, because we put new arrivals out at 10 o'clock Friday morning, there was actually a line every Friday because of that punk stuff that was in there.
What do you have right now in your store that's extremely expensive and valuable for sale that we can tell our listeners about?
Extremely expensive and valuable. Most of that stuff's on the walls and isn't for sale.
See, I know that. That's why I asked that question before. I know guys like you. You're like me. You're not going to sell something
Right.
that you know is extremely rare and valuable.
Or it's at my house. but actually, Sam just 2 days ago got 3 original sealed copies of Pearl Jam records. So Vitology, Versus, and 10.
They didn't put a lot of vinyl out in the 90s.
Early 90s.
Right.
So there was hardly any being pressed, and the Pearl Jam fans are, fanatics, and they're a lot.
Are they for sale in the store now?
She just put them out yesterday in Northampton. So I think 10 still sealed from that time period. The last one I saw sold was like 600, so we priced it at 400.
That's a good price.
So that's healthy. Yeah.
Good price.
So those, I know that, just because we were talking about those yesterday, they're on the top of my mind. I'm sure there's other stuff I know there is in that range, but I can't.
Yeah, well, I was still working for labels in the 90s, and when we pressed albums up, like I worked at A&M, like a Soundgarden record, there weren't very many copies. So if you got those records, they're valuable now.
Yeah.
Maybe not as valuable as like the Misfits or SSD or early first pressings. Like there's a Last Right 7-inch single that Tang put out. It's just on a white sleeve. I mean, someone said they bought it for $3,000. Wow. I mean, those records are like really valuable.
Yeah, and the rarity of that stuff is what really drives it, right? And things like the SSD, where we kind of started with this in the punk, and is it a surprise with the value that's in it? Really, no, because that stuff has held up over time, right? It's not like a new wave synthy thing that might have been popular at the time and sold a ton, and now is kind of dated. That stuff holds up. That teen angst is always going to be there. It sounds great.
Hardcore is bigger than ever.
There just weren't many, right? It's not like they were selling millions at the time, so it was usually self-funded and
Al Burrill from SSD had the
which was a great
Exclaim
show.
label.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I saw the Circle Jerks last summer at the House of Blues. Sold out. Okay. Now, if you would have told me in 1984 that you'd see a band like the Circle Jerks playing in huge arenas like that around the country, I would never have believed it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these old hardcore bands are bigger than ever now.
Right. And not necessarily hardcore, but on the outside fringes of that is I've always been a huge Social D fan.
Oh, and they're huge now.
That was another one that I loved just a few years ago at the Palladium, right next door to the store in Worcester. They played, and it was a August night, and I don't know if they've done this since then, but there's no HVAC in that building. So, you walked in and I think it was oversold. Like if the fire department came, and that's a big room, I think it holds a couple thousand, and you couldn't move in there. It had to be 100 degrees, you were just tasting the sweat from everyone. And I went through a quick, I'm too fucking old for this, to you know what? If I'm seeing Social D, this is the way it should be.
I believe you. I've been in those situations. I got to ask you a couple things before I let you go here. First thing is, are CDs done now? And also, what about cassettes? Because why are these labels some bands and labels are making cassettes?
Sure.
I don't get it. Tell me, does anyone care about CDs and cassettes anymore?
Let's hit the cassettes first, and I'm firmly in your camp. To me, there's not many redeeming qualities, right? And part of that is because we grew up with it, and whether it be in the car or your player, and they got eaten, and then you're trying to tighten it up, and now you're listening along to it, and it sounds good, and then it pops back in again.
And then you pull it out, and tape is all over the place.
Not to mention tape hiss, and if you put a magnet next to it, that again, it faded in and out and all that stuff. So I don't get it. What I do believe it is it's a fairly inexpensive way for especially smaller bands to get stuff made. There's capacity in the manufacturing of that where there isn't in vinyl. It's pretty inexpensive. And so for fans who really want something by the artist, right? Again, when we were growing up, all these record stores that were everywhere you went to had posters, records, apparel, pins, really cool, like die cut ones and everything, and all this stuff that you could get. You go to the carnival, you throw a dart at a balloon, you get a Judas Priest mirror for you all, and things like that. That doesn't really exist anymore. So I think fans just want to support and want something to collect from their artists. And I think that's where cassettes are kind of coming in. I'm sure there are people who, want to listen and things like that, but I think it's a little bit more of a knick-knack thing than it is for sound quality and stuff like that.
Every once in a while I need money and I'll sell something from my collection, and I just got $100 not too long ago for a Bleach cassette.
Oh, yeah.
Nirvana Bleach cassette. So some things are definitely worth
and
money.
And again, that one was early, and they probably weren't making many and all that sort of stuff, and they weren't as big
Sub
at that
Pop.
time.
I was on Sub Pop.
Yep. Because that record, if you get a first pressing, is worth a lot too.
So you don't think much of CDs, I bet, right? I don't.
Yeah, I don't typically listen. I still have all of mine, all that sort of stuff.
Me too, but I got rid of all the cases. They're all in like those old
books.
bookcase things now.
I think again that they have a time and a place. There's still much higher sound quality than streaming in most cases, right? You can get to high quality on anything if you pay enough and have the right equipment. But for your average MP3 or streaming service and things like that, CDs are still much better sounding if you have the right things to play them through. So I think that's a thing. I also think that there are, much like there are records that would never burnt to CDs and aren't on streaming services. So the only way to get it, some old psych record, is to come across it and to, buy it online and things like that. There's a whole bunch of stuff on CDs that same thing is, going to happen. And people are going to say,
so you're saying CDs could end up becoming, could be rare.
Sure.
And people will want them.
There's those subsets of everything.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is happening right now is, records have gone up so much. And really in the last 3 years.
Way high.
Yeah, and not only the used,
price-wise,
but also the new. I look, and something that I got 2 months ago, I get now, and it's up 30%. That's a big jump overnight. And so as that continues to go up, now CDs that are really the records of 20, 30 years ago, you can get for a few dollars and have the whole CD. So why not, right? So especially college kids, other people like that, you can go in and for $20 leave with a whole bunch of music. So that's a cool thing. And so, I think
I see what you're saying. So they could be worth something again.
Yeah, and I think they have their place for sure. I don't, as far as new ones go, we don't bring any into the store unless someone specifically orders it. We order anything for anyone, whether it be DVDs, CDs, anything that they want, but we're not bringing it in to stock it on the shelf. But I think the used ones, that there's definitely a market there for that.
When's Record Store Day? Isn't it coming? That's
is.
why I got you in here, by the way.
Yeah. It's April 22nd. Also my birthday.
Right around the corner.
On
your birthday.
It's the second time that happened in
You have to
recent
work
years.
on your birthday. Not
matter.
just work, but it's probably going to be insane, right?
It always is. It's crazy.
You have
Worcester.
long lines at your store?
Yeah, we open at 8 that day, and there's usually 100 people or more in line that we're shuffling.
And you know through. Everything you're getting already?
I don't. That's always
you don't know.
And we start a month ago getting questions on through every avenue, whether it be phone, Instagram, Facebook, emails, and I always try to put it on the site and tell everyone we won't be responding to every individual one. There's a page on the site that says it, and as soon as we know everything that we have, which honestly usually isn't until a few days before,
that's awesome.
When it's either in hand or in transit, and I have the shipping documentation, that I can truly put it together and say, okay, here's the quantity we're going to have in Worcester, and here's the quantity we're going to have in Northampton, and here's the price, and then I publish all of that. So probably
and the line forms the night before.
Yeah, yep. It's a crazy time, but it's a lot of fun.
Well, thanks, Joe. And a few people out there listening, Joe's albums in Worcester and Northampton, great stores.
Appreciate it.
And I highly recommend it. And joesalbums.com is really where you want to go.
Yeah, it's a huge tool that a lot of small places don't have, even some bigger ones where everything is on there. You can pre-order, you can choose, order and pick up in store. So that's, one of the things, because I've had people come in so many times that say, oh, I saw this last night and I came in to get it. I'm like, yeah, it's on its way to California now. So just order it when you see it and you know you want it and choose pick up in store. And then whenever you get there, it doesn't matter if it's, I've had some stuff sit there for 8 months and then somebody from, New Hampshire comes down and says, oh, that one that I ordered that long ago. And I'm like, yeah, it's still sitting there.
That's fantastic. All right, Joe, thanks, man.
Thank you very, very much.
All right.